Millennials are America's largest, most educated generation in American history. A generation of ambition, education, and progress facing an uncertain reality. Born into an era of economic chaos, they face challenges far beyond what they were told to prepare for. They've had to rethink traditional milestones as they enter adulthood during global uncertainty. Their struggles mirror those of a generation before them, Japan's lost generation. The same story, different country, different time. America's lost generation goes beyond the numbers to capture the unique ways this generation is reshaping their future, in their own words. It's a story of real people, authentic challenges, and untold resilience. Explore the stories and reflections of America's lost generation by Cameron Cohen. Available now at soupllc.com.
Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, I am joined by Joe Menninger. Now, don't let that name fool you. I have edited his name to be acceptable to the American audience, as he is German from the lovely city of Frankfurt. I met him, okay, so this is kind of silly. I met him as a referral to talk about podcasting from friend of the show, Stefan Fair. And as it turns out, we don't play at his level. So he's slumming it down with us today, and we're very thankful for that. But he is a big wheel, and when I say a big wheel, I mean a big wheel. Not Volkswagen size, BMW size wheel. In the European startup space, he has a top 2 European startup podcast, and he's the founder of a startup Rad.io. He also, weirdly enough, is a judge for the annual Lovey Awards, which is an award they have in Germany for startups and internet creativity and digital innovation in fields of culture and technology, which I think is really cool. A lot of people, especially on Twitter, kind of nag bag on the European startup scene because the tech industry in Europe is just so much smaller than it is in the US and all this type of thing. And I'm excited for this conversation because it's going to be interesting to see what really is going on in the European startup space and what makes it exciting. He also, as I said, is a tremendous podcaster, and one of these days we'll have a chance to work with him when we get big enough to really make that work. But we're going to find all about all of this, the startup creativity, startup scene in Europe, the podcasting scene. It's all really cool, and we're going to find out more. So welcome to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Yes. Well, why don't we begin from the beginning? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and your show, and we'll start from there.
Well, what should I say? I used to be a management consultant. I worked for over a decade, mostly in capital markets with well-known companies across the world, mostly based out of Frankfurt and traveling to different places, different continents for work. At one point, a friend of mine introduced me to podcasting. I first did a German-only podcast and started 2014, what is today StartupRate.io. I had exactly 14 listeners to my very first episode, and I felt very great there. Back in the day, the idea was German startups, the German-speaking area, the DACH region, like Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and tiny Liechtenstein. They all speak German, and they're usually considered part to be of either the DACH region or the GSA region, and I cover them in English. What I usually do is I have a few in-depth interviews with entrepreneurs a month, like once a week. And once a month, I get together with my co-founder, a German journalist living for more than a decade now in New York City and working there as a journalist for the German press agency, DPA. Big high five to Chris there, my co-founder, and we get together and wrap up what was going on, what was important in the German-speaking startup scene in the last month. And on the side, I also consult for different projects, especially where the more classical enterprises and startups and scale-ups meet, as well as being a judge for the Lovey Awards.
Yes, that we started podcasting around the same time. I kind of gave up 3 years later and got out of all of this, and then kind of 3 years after that got back into it. So you're a testimony to what happens when you stay consistent over a long period of time, rather than jumping ship and then jumping back in the ship later on, which is really, really cool. So
That is the positive way to see it. The negative way is I was just too stubborn to give up.
Well, I mean, there's something. I mean, there's something to be said for that. You know, people say that success is just on the other side of where you think you want to give up, and to some degree, especially in the internet content space, in the podcasting space, sometimes success is just outlasting everyone else who gave up. A minority of people produce all the content on the internet. And so, especially in the podcasting space, most shows have, people give up after about the third episode or so. And so that, if you can just kind of outlast everyone else, then you have a chance to kind of rise to the top. I have 400 episodes and haven't quite broken out as much as you have yet, but people say that that's how it works. So I trust in that. And so it's good. It's really just kind of outlasting everyone else. So I think that stubbornness to some degree is a bit of an asset. And judging by what you've got going on, I think it worked. So I think it's a good thing. So I want to immediately dive into the European startup scene, because obviously here in America we have Y Combinator, we have all these different startup things. I was always trying to shoehorn myself into that world, never could. Unless I think a lot of people kind of look at Europe and it's low growth, high unemployment, not any big tech unicorns, and are kind of like, what are they doing over there? What's going on? So take us into this world. What does the German-speaking European startup scene look like? What is happening? And where's your unicorns? Have you found them?
Actually, we do have 30 plus unicorns here in Germany, and we track them on our website on a regular basis. We call it the Unicorn Tracker, the Unicorn Index. Also, actually, that's a usual statistics trick. The unemployment is not that different. In the US, you just kick out people as discouraged workers after a certain amount of time, and they don't show up in employment statistics anymore. That's how you can keep them down. So
I'm glad you said that, because I was just telling someone last night. They said, everyone talks about how low unemployment is, but it doesn't seem anyone can find a job. I'm like, well, when you stop counting a lot of workers, the numbers look a lot better than they really should. If you go look at the U7 number, it's quite dire because it counts everyone who, is not working, sort of thing, minus retired people or seasonal workers. And the situation is a lot more dire. And these days, youth unemployment is so bad, we're keeping up with France and Italy. So we really don't have much room to complain anymore or talk. But yeah, what is the European startup scene like? Here, it's all 520-somethings locking themselves in a 1-bedroom apartment with laptops, energy drinks, and a lot of cologne for a couple years to build something. What's the European scene like?
I don't think there's like a complete European scene. You still have the borders within the EU, the European Union. Also, you do have, due to Brexit, an increasing distance in terms of regulation, in terms of funding, in terms of cooperation between what is the UK and what is the European Union. I don't say it's big, but it's getting a slightly bigger over time. There is also a German-speaking startup scene, but it also knows kind of borders, especially given Switzerland is not part of the European Union. But it's similar. But what many people don't get, especially about Germany, which is one of the largest economies in the world and makes up almost quarter of the GDP of the European Union. It is important as a startup place, but they are not aggregating at any given place. You may know a little bit about Munich, deep tech, especially there's one place out of the technical university called Unternehmertum, TUM, written in capital letters for Technical University Munich. They are very good. They have put in a tremendous amount of work and a really, really big program that is now getting spread all over Germany to get more startups out of university.
The Stanford of Germany, one might say.
Yeah, Possibly,
Yeah.
possibly. And they're very good. Also, if you're interested, of course, I have an interview with them in English. And also, Berlin is pretty important as the first startup hub to emerge in Germany. They're more a little bit customer facing. But when you look into the surveys that are going on, especially the one from the German Startup Association, I don't say it's the complete picture because not every startup participates, of course not. But if you look at this picture, you only have something like 20% to a quarter of all the startup activity in Munich and in Berlin. And that's one of the problems why Startup Radar is here, because there's a big lot of unseen places where you do have really, really great startups. They are in the middle of nowhere in places like Bad Zwischenahn, Norway or something.
Which is like the country. It's like your startup is surrounded by farms. I think that's so. I want to talk about this because one of the big problems with tech growth over the last 20 years is it's all been concentrated in a handful of places. And our country is huge. It is the size of the EU, sort of, even in all that space. And unfortunately, most of the tech and all the growth in jobs have been concentrated in San Francisco, in Seattle, in New York, and it just hasn't reached other places. So I think it's honestly remarkable and better that it's diffuse. It's all spread out in all these different places so that everyone, if you have that kind of rising boat of prosperity, a lot more people are going to be able to participate that than here where it's also concentrated in such a few locations. Everyone's trying to move there, drives up cost of housing, causes all sorts of social problems, and leaves the middle of the country behind. No one's excited to do a startup in Kansas City, but everyone's moving to San Francisco.
And you have to go back in time to understand this, because Germany, basically 1648, the Peace of Westphalia, Germany was split up into hundreds of different places, like Prussia, Bavaria, Hessen, Darmstadt. They all have been more or less really independent places, and that kind of still plays in today's role. And then there are places where you find,
until Bismarck comes along and says, "Let's be one big happy Germany, but not you, Austria."
There's even some story before that. 1848, German Revolution. They want to have a constitutional monarchy. They draft a constitution, and then they go to the Prussian king. Do you want to be the head of state? And he said no, and it all breaks down.
Yeah.
Too much history for a tech podcast here, but anyway.
My listeners love this because I do this stuff all the time. So my listeners are all about it. So yes, more.
There's even places like, I want to highlight here. I may be a little bit biased because it's the city I was born in, the city of Mainz, Mainz. The city of the Johannes Gutenberg, the book printing guy. Barely anybody have them on their radar as biotech hub, but they're really important because you may have heard of something like happening like Corona. There was a company that developed the vaccine that was later supplied in the US by Pfizer. It's called BioNTech, and guess where it's headquartered?
Mainz.
Yeah, exactly. And there are lots of places like that where you do have really important startups, really crucial pieces, or where they work on really high-end fusion, aerospace. For example, did you know that Hamburg, the city, is the third largest aviation hub in the world, behind Seattle, Boeing, and Lyon, number one of the Airbus locations, and Hamburg is number two. And there are a lot of logistics startups there that play a crucial role even in aviation, but you don't see them. I think that's one of the big problems, because a lot of what Germany does industrial production. It's traditional, very much B2B, what they're doing, and you don't advertise that much. And I have to totally admit that Germany is very bad in advertising. For example, the city of Frankfurt that I live in, Pixelmondo is headquartered there, and you totally have seen something they do. They are amazing in special effects. You may have seen Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
Guess who made the special effects for the dragons?
That must be them.
Yeah, exactly. And if I would have been in charge of the city marketing of the city of Frankfurt,
I would have that on every bus poster, sides of airplane. Yeah. Yes, yes. No,
actually,
Steph and I always.
It's not even. It has not even been on the building where the company is located.
Here's how American we are. I worked for a company that did advertising for the popular video game Fortnite. Literally, you walk into their office, you have to go upstairs. The entire sidewall of the stairs is a giant Fortnite poster. You walk upstairs, you turn to the right, giant Fortnite poster going 9 feet down the wall, and you turn left to go into their offices. Every available space, Fortnite, like we work with these people, Epic Games. And so,
yes.
That's
American companies in Germany. A friend of mine works for Microsoft. They have a life science Halo John 117 statue there in the building. Yeah.
No, it's Stefan and I are always joking because I've been trying to figure out what to do with myself, my show, my job, my career, sort of thing, because it's, I've been a content creator and full-time artist for most of my life. And as you can imagine, that, has not necessarily always been the smartest decision. And he's like, you should come here. I said, I don't do anything that anyone over there needs, but it sounds like they need some marketing and some storytelling. I'm like, I'm beginning to see market opportunity. So Stefan's always trying to get me to come over there.
Don't get me wrong, but I do believe there is a lot of German startups who would like to have an American chief marketing officer.
Yeah, I don't know how I would get the visa to do that, but that would be a lot of fun. Anyway, enough about me. Back to you. That's I'm supposed to be interviewing you. We're talking way too about myself far too much. No, I mean, but I love that, in when you're talking about it's really it's a PR problem, really. The conversation about what's really happening in Europe isn't happening. Now part of me kind of market opportunity, but I was going to ask why do you think these startups or these, this ecosystem is hesitating to promote itself to the world?
One of them, of course, is German habits. For example, if you see a work recommendation from the US, it has awesome letter. It's a marketing document. I had one boss here in Germany who said, "If I don't yell at you, it's praise enough."
Yes.
Also, what you got to see, a lot of those companies are not necessarily in the space where it would pay for them, for the companies to really advertise all over the place. There are companies coming out of Unternehmertum. For example, I just want to highlight Flixbus, who now owns Greyhound Bus in the US.
We have Flixbus here. We have as a brand. We have that as I live in the New York City area, and they have routes going between DC and Boston all along the East Coast because it's all kind of compact. That's only about 800 miles, and you have DC, Boston, Wilmington, Philadelphia, New York, all in a line. So it makes for a great bus route. So we have them here. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it's totally worth for them to advertise and to have people be aware of this option because it's a B2C brand. But if you are into B2B business, it usually doesn't pay to be known everywhere. You just have to be known for your good work in certain areas of the industrial market.
No, I mean, I get that at an individual company level, but I feel like as a national enterprise or even an international EU level enterprise, it seems to me there would be a trade association or something that would be promoting this stuff a little bit more, because the perception on this side of the pond, which we're finding out today is incorrect, is that, it's a museum over there. Nothing exciting is happening. Who cares? And everyone's looking westward, to China. All the excitement seems to be in China or South Korea, sort of thing. And the thing that I'm really finding out about this conversation, I think is really fascinating, is that not so. Lots of interesting things happening. It's just not necessarily publicized in the same way. It's kind of is lacking a bit of a PR effort. And it's kind of interesting that there's not been, like I said, a trade association or some other thing that's kind of like, yeah, let's let people know, because I think it would also attract more investment dollars. You could get, American investors looking for a return to get excited about some of these companies, and that could be new sources of funding pouring in.
Actually, that's already working. I have been privileged to participate in a workshop, a small piece of the EU startup strategy back in December last year, and they had some academic papers there. And actually, there is a net inflow of investment capital into the European Union for quite some time now. It's not necessarily always from the US, but when you see like the big funding rounds that coin unicorns, then you usually see something like Sequoia, Tiger Global, but also SoftBank International, SBI from Japan, or Tencent from China. So there is already an international money flow in there, but again, also funds not necessarily so present to everybody that they would recognize it, but they make a lot of good money. I've seen some research that European-based VC funds have on average outperformed US-based funds for the last 5 to 10 years.
That doesn't surprise me at all, because there's a lot of funds make a lot of bets and some very weird stuff that ends up going nowhere. And I'm kind of like, wow, even at the time, some of us could have told you that wasn't a good idea. But some people, it's all end up with a lot of personal relationships and all this type of thing. That's fascinating. Let's talk about the podcasting scene and it's how does one become the top startup podcast in the German speaking area? How does that happen?
You just don't give up. Actually, it was a process. I do believe what's important for me is that I did over time. In the beginning, I was all over the place and I did almost everything. I specialized more and more over time. First focusing on Germany, then on the DACH region. I thought, okay, that's already big enough. And then I was, because of my background, being a consultant, working in B2B and finance for quite some time, I found the business-facing side is much more interesting for me personally than it actually is the customer-facing side. So that's how I actually created my own niche. And that's where I'm doing pretty good, because if any person in charge of marketing in the US, Canadian, Australian, New Zealand, any English-speaking country is looking for podcasts to advertise tech, entrepreneurship, startups in Germany, I'm one of the first two to pop up. That's it.
No, I mean that's quite impressive, and I think that's also indicative of the type of guests you've cultivated, and how you treated them, and the results that they've gotten, and how valuable people find the information, in that space. That's huge by itself.
Yeah, I always try not to make it like that dry, even if it's B2B. For example, I had a content partnership with a high-level event here in Germany, and Stephen Chu, the Nobel laureate, Stanford professor, and former undersecretary for energy under Obama, was present there. And so we did an interview. And for example, we talked about like solar power. And so I was asking him, Professor Chu, do you have solar panels on your roof? And he said, no.
Yeah.
Turns out his tiles are too old to support that, but that's something I try to make a little bit more entertaining. Or before Clark, it's an insurance broker here in Germany, Unicorn. Before Clark became like popular, like a big household name brand, I was talking to Christopher, the founder and CEO at the time. He's still a founder, but he moved into the supervisory board by now. And I was talking to him because he was on the list of Bloomberg most promising startups you've never heard of. I asked him if it was award for him, the most promising startups, or a challenge for his marketing you never heard of.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like I like to structure my interviews to have a little sense of humor, a little bit of fun with all that dry content going hand in hand.
Yes, no, that's very good. We're very similar in trying to take, certain things and make them a lot more interesting and just kind of expose people to them. I've always kind of been a interesting things, interesting people show. And that's kind of an aberration in the podcasting world, because most everybody is very narrowly defined, or it's around something they're trying to sell. And, this is more like an audio visual magazine of, hey, there's interesting people doing interesting things. Let's meet them, sort of thing. That's
interesting. I've never seen my podcast as an audio magazine. Thank you. I try to use that.
Yeah. Well, that's where I started out in. I started out in printed publications. That's where I ran my first magazine when I was 21. Ran another when I was 23 to 25. And then that's when I started the Cameron Journal shortly thereafter. So I cut my teeth in print magazines, all this sort of thing. And that's what the Cameron Journal is a written publication. And it is also, there's interesting people and things, and they deserve to be highlighted and to share their expertise. And that for me ranges from fiction book authors, which I love to interview. Those are my favorite people to interview, to, tech people, business leadership people, and, German region language startup podcasters as well. Falls under my broad umbrella. So yeah, I definitely appreciate that. Why don't you tell us about the Lovey Awards next? Because we haven't really touched on that yet. So what awards do you guys give out, and to whom?
So basically, I'm not personally giving out this. I'm volunteering to judge.
Yes.
Basically, it's part of an organization that is based in New York City. They do the Webby Awards, and they kind of have a brand for Europe, which is the Lovey Awards. And basically, what I do is I go on their program, and they give me something to listen to watch, to judge and rate this within the system, within the guidelines. And they do 7 to 10 different judges have something rated. And then on average, they get an average rating from that. And that's part of how they award. You can also nominate there. And I actually got caught up in this because I was also nominated a few years ago with my podcast for a Lovey Award.
Well, that's fun. So yeah, it's that sounds fun, and it sounds like a fun thing to do, which has got to be nice. So and it's it's probably a break from everything else, so can't be too terrible.
Yes, so, I've really enjoyed.
Yeah. No, that's very good. I wanted to kind of a little bit of a future look. Obviously AI is here and it's coming for everybody and everything. It is kind of a two-parter. How is AI development going in these German area startups and all this type of thing? And then most importantly, what are you guys going to do about the electricity, which seems to be running short these days?
Number one, Germany has done quite a lot of basic work in AI. They also have, with the German Center for Artificial Intelligence, Deutsches Forschungszentrum für Künstliche Intelligenz, they have one of the largest research centers on AI in the world. Their graduates are some of the most sought after specialists. But
I mean, that's amazing. Yeah, that's awesome.
Once again, the people could not properly monetize what they've researched. I'm talking about the MP3 moment here because MP3 was developed by a German professor as part of his PhD thesis von Brandenburger, but it was monetized somewhere else. So that's unfortunate. They do a lot of very good groundwork, but they fall short at one point of the monetization. But I do believe there is a hell lot of stuff within the very complex processes you have in Germany. Think about manufacturing of precision machinery, automobile parts, chemistry. BASF, the largest chemical company in the world, Merck, and so on and so forth. They're all based in Germany, and I do believe specialized AI can make a big difference there in terms of being more efficient and in terms of generating better outcomes, faster, better products.
Well, it seems like, I mean, AI is still a bit of an open interface. You can still, no one has reigned supreme. It seems like this would be the golden opportunity to really put lightning in a bottle, as we would say.
Yes, and also there are a lot of programs going on right now. There has been in the last few years a big wave of newly founded deep tech startups within Germany, but also within the broader Europe area that you may see some results from in the future. They're right now at seed Series A stage, and they'll be big promise to scale. Plus, there are different government programs. For example, the European Investment Fund announced 70 billion investments as LP into European VCs. There is almost 12 billion program going on in Germany from the government alone. Plus, there is a private-public partnership where the private partners put in the majority of money, 12 billion VIN initiative, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot going on right now that is slowly moving forward, but I do believe it's currently developing a lot of momentum, especially in the deep tech area, especially in the startups that have been founded 12 to 36 months ago, and they're now processing.
Yes. Well, and that kind of brings me to the second part of the question. The electricity aspect. AI needs a lot of power. And we're on the struggle bus in this country. We haven't built a new power plant since the 80s. And we're already running out. Germany is closing power plants. It's a whole huge problem. Who's got a handle on that situation? We're not even having the conversation. I'm hoping y'all have it together.
Well, everybody hopes, but I have to admit, even during the time when the Russian gas was cut off, there have been big talks about like limiting energy usage, brownouts, like plant outages of energy. A hell lot of industries would have gone bankrupt, and so on and so forth. And actually, not a lot has happened. So there have been no people sitting in the dark around the Christmas tree. There have been no industrial facilities being without energy. It's pricier. Yes, they are, of course, yelling at the German government always to reduce that. We'll see if this happens. Plus, with this turning off, as you said, the nuclear energy, Germany was forced to invest into a more renewable-based future, which is not only good for the planet, but also Germany develops the capability to have, again, a world-beating industry similar to automobiles.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the other half of that is that if they can pull off a industrialized, wealthy country that gets the vast majority of its energy from renewables, every company involved in that's going to be in demand throughout the rest of Europe. I mean, and into this country as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to be a quite significant thing, especially given that Trump just killed our green energy industry with the big beautiful bill, and we're going back to coal and gas, those old canards.
According to the German Statistics Office, I just have the data here on the other side. 59.4% has been from renewable energy, compared to conventional energy, 40.6% in 2024.
Yeah, but I think my concern was, I mean, I'm glad that things are stable there now. That's obviously a good thing. But AI needs so much power. That's a lot of power generation to come up with in a hurry. Like, where's that conversation going? I wonder.
But you have to admit it's easier to put up a lot of windmills like all across the country than one centralized power plant that takes like 3 decades to get ready.
I mean, no, I mean that is true. It's kind of it's like, oh, we need some more electricity. Well, we can put some, solar panels up. That'll be on in a couple months. Whereas a new nuclear power plant here in this country, it's a decade. Like, if we started building today, it won't come online till 2035, sort of thing. So yes, that definitely, I think in terms of a timeline, going is definitely good and helpful. It's just I think there's a whole conversation happening, because in most industrialized countries, new electricity generation kind of leveled off in the 80s into the 90s. Germany being the exception because of reunification after the fall of communism. And so there hasn't been a new big need for electricity in 40 years. And now we're faced with not only do we have this new technology, but we have an infrastructure problem. And I was hoping that, the Germans can always be relied upon to have some smart, clever solution to the problem. And so I was kind of curious as to how that was going, because right now over here, we're still trying to decide if we are indeed going to build something. Although the tech companies are so desperate, they're buying old nuclear power plants and recommissioning them. That's how desperate they are around here. And so I was just curious, given the current crisis and AI's demands, what was happening. And I think, I hadn't thought of that, of like, it's faster to build renewables. It gives Germany a new industry of the future, which could be a total game changer for the economy.
Plus,
and gives you a chance to generate electricity for AI.
There's another important part to this puzzle. It's the energy storage. And there's a lot of energy storage development going on right now in Germany. Just interviewed a startup that is actually using secondhand batteries as an energy storage. But I do believe there will be a lot here in the future, because if solar and wind energy, they do have a reliability problem, not necessarily the one offshore that is more reliable, but actually when you solve the storage problem, you can go much faster to renewable energy, and especially the US, they do have a big advantage. We don't have a New Mexico. We don't have the Arizona, where you can basically put everywhere solar power.
Yeah. No, I mean, the other big one we have that I wish you would develop more that we never seem to is geothermal. That one never ever seems to get off the ground, even though it's literally power from the planet. Like, if you put it at scale, we could power from one geothermal plant in California. We could power everything west of the Mississippi. Which would be tremendous. I mean, we never seem to be able to get these things together, but I think the thing I was thinking about is, I think the demand for new electricity by AI is going to make us rethink this whole infrastructure. And I think, interestingly enough, I think it's going to change society in a lot of interesting ways.
Yes, totally. Plus, you also the US has to do much more for their energy infrastructure than Germany has. For example, just getting back to New Mexico and Arizona, just two desert states. So, sorry for everybody. I know your beautiful state is not completely desert, but that's a picture you have from it. And there's a lot of space where you could put solar energy. The thing is, you then need to transport it like all across the place. you have the Rocky Mountains. We don't need to cross the Alps with our energy infrastructure.
Right.
You have tornadoes. We don't. You have
Right.
hurricanes. We don't. And you
Right.
do have a hell lot of snow, for example, on the Rocky Mountains in the winter. It's not necessarily the same thing for the little bit of Alps that we have here in Germany. So there's a lot more challenges. Plus, like the big the big woods, the big national forests, like all the places where you have for miles, tens of miles, hundreds of miles, not really somebody taking up energy, and you may still need to go through that. It's
No, I
different
mean
challenge.
you will drive. So I'm originally from Colorado, which is out that direction, and you 110% will go. I mean, I took my ex-girlfriend out there a couple years ago, and we were leaving Denver, and we get past the airport, and she's like, "There's nothing here." I'm like, "Well, the farmers would say it's their wheat fields and their pivot irrigation systems, but I mean, yes, I mean, and when you're crossing the mountains, you'll have a national forest, trees, barely anything, and all you'll have is the giant pathway for the transmission lines for electricity go through. And if you want to go out there, they literally go out there by helicopter because there's no road, sort of thing. They have to come by air because it's so remote. Yeah, I mean, those are obviously huge challenges that, are not faced by other places that have different geographies and all this sort of thing. But I mean, I think for Germany, that's great news, because it gives you a tremendous opportunity to make these things in a very practical, scalable way. And obviously, the story of that could be really cool. If you end up with a modern, industrialized Western nation on renewables that's also leading in AI, that will be an example for everyone to follow. And it will radically change society.
Yeah, hopefully change it for the better. But there's this nice saying: forecasts are always difficult, especially concerning the future.
Oh yes. Oh, I mean, it's not guaranteed, but if it happens that way, that'll be a huge story. And it will be. It could be. I mean, we could be having a very interesting conversation about that in 5 years. When the rest of the media wakes up to what's happened. It's like, but I mean, at the same time, though, if someone's going to do it, the Germans will be the ones to figure that out. So like I said, you can always rely upon to come up with some clever solution for some problem. So it's very, very interesting. Well, we've come to that time of the show where we do plugs to let people know where we can find you online and keep up with you on social media. So why don't you let us know where we can keep up with you at?
It's Joe ERN Manager on LinkedIn, or you can simply go to startuprate.io, and there you'll find everything about us, or look for startuprate.io on Twitter, LinkedIn, Threads, Facebook, Blue Sky. Did I forget something? Yeah, TikTok, YouTube, podcast, your podcasting app. We have almost we had last year 2.5 million downloads, and we're looking to beat this. So if anybody is interested in all of that, check in.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast.
Totally my pleasure. Thank you.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter. And we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.